Hello, my name is Tiffany Demiris, and I am a doctoral student at Louisiana State University under the direction of Dr. Chad Seifert. And I'm here today to share with you my presentation entitled Archival Research and Facility Tours, a Methodological Introduction to College Sport Management. The purpose of this presentation is to inform and introduce archival research and facility tours to college sport management scholars as a viable and complementary research alternative to other more well-known scholarly approaches, i.e. quantitative and qualitative. Other researchers have discussed the benefits of employing historical research methods to understand things like organizational theory, current issues, and critical and innovative studies of sport management, such as Dr. Seifert, Amos and Silk, Park, and Kaiser. Historical research is a viable approach to critically examine surviving records, to draw conclusions, to establish trends, and to highlight facts about various management decisions and environmental prompts to showcase how the past can potentially put forth suggestions and enhance decision-making practices in the future. Tours and archives. Tours generally center on offering the history of the consumer artifact and exploring a past external to the product itself. When we think about a venue, it's generally to watch a sporting event. But a facility tour allows you to think and learn about the past of the venue, the past of the team, and to think about all of these other historical pieces of information that are external to the product of an actual sporting event. The same can be said about halls of fame and museums that might be located at a sport facility. Ramshaw and Gannon and VC and Dimanche also suggested that facility tours are effective resources because they can offer researchers firsthand experience on an organization's history. When you go on a tour, you don't simply walk around and look at the venue. An agent of the organization will generally guide you on the tour and offer various pieces of information, historical and current, to help you create a more complete picture of the organization, its past, and its potential future. Archives are generally described as a physical location dedicated to the holding of special collections, artifacts, and documents from or on specific people, events, organizations, and communities. Many organizations, including university athletic departments, events, entrepreneurs, and products, develop and possess substantial public and private records that we as an academic field can review to advance knowledge not only of the past, but to help understand current and future sport business practices and decisions. Archival research and facility tours have been shown to be useful in the development of organizational and institutional theory. Steps in the archival process. If you wish to employ archival research in your study, these are the steps that you should take to do so. Beginning search and research question. You want to decide on a topic of study and narrow the topic by creating manageable research questions to be answered. For instance, a topic like college football would be entirely too broad to study if you are attempting to submit a manuscript to a journal. You may want to narrow down your search to a specific conference, a specific time period, or a specific school. You will narrow down your topic even further by creating a specific research question, such as, in my case, attempting to explain how financing of college football venues evolved over time within the National Collegiate Athletic Association Football Bowl subdivision. As you can see, this is much more focused than college football and will allow me to focus on documents that can explain this particular phenomenon. Acquire documents. Utilize the resources of an archive to pinpoint documents or collections and request access. Make use of finding aids, document catalogs, and archivists or special collections managers. Complete a source criticism. Within this point, sources are triangulated to reduce the impact of dissonant data and to confirm information presented by individual sources whenever possible. Utilize both primary and secondary sources for triangulation and information confirmation. Analysis and interpretation of evidence from sources. This is where you will code your data, create timelines, spreadsheets, etc. You will use the information to establish relationships with larger themes and make inferences and connections from information within your different documents. And then you will report conclusions. Primary and secondary sources. Primary documents can include presidential papers, organizational memorandums, financial and accounting records, bond retirement schedules, feasibility studies, newspapers, photographs, letters of correspondence, and speeches or recordings of oral testimonies. Secondary sources can include history books, journal articles, and newspapers. It is important to triangulate and complete a source criticism, which is a validity or reliability test for both primary and secondary sources emanating from archives and tours. It is also important to utilize both primary and secondary sources in order to create a more complete landscape of the past. If you have too few primary documents, you may not be able to understand the gravity of what was going on at that time. Piecing together various different primary sources, sort of like a puzzle, can help you create this picture with the help of secondary sources to fill in any gaps. Locating and requesting primary sources. Many archives employ finding aids, which are tools to assist researchers in locating groupings of documents, collections, or other archival materials available in a specific archive. These aids may include inventories, boxes or folder lists, indexes, registers, catalogs, or card catalogs. Researchers should create pull lists from these finding aids that outline which documents, boxes, and/or folders they would like to view. The researcher should then submit the pull list to the archive staff and work with a staff member to schedule an appointment to view the documents from the list. It is helpful to take photos if permitted for later reference. Since you may be traveling to an archive and because the documents need to be pulled from storage, it is imperative that you take carefully detailed notes as well as take photos if allowed to ensure that you will have all of the information that you need when you do begin triangulation and writing. Source criticism. This is an extremely important part of the historical research process. Internal source criticism questions the authority, perspective, and trustworthiness of the document author. For instance, historical scholars ask if source authors possess any bias or requisite skill, experience, and reputation to research and generate conclusions. And so this is saying, does the person who wrote the document have the authority to make the claims that they have made? Are they an expert in their field? What types of experiences do they have that makes them qualified to discuss the topic at hand? External criticism involves offering evidence the scholar analyzed the origin of the source, so identifying the author of the document or artifact and the time and place that it was produced, identifying the purpose and audience of the document or artifact, and ascertaining the environmental conditions from which the record or artifact was created. And so again, you want to look at the document and figure out what biases there may be in the creation of the document. A letter from an alumni association to a university president looking to build a stadium has implicit bias because the alumni association wants to build the stadium. You want to recognize this and understand it so that you can address it within your research to provide transparency and so other scholars cannot potentially punch holes in your argument. Problems in archival research and source. Source criticism is important because it allows the researcher to unpack any motives or bias from a primary or secondary source. By utilizing multiple documents that overlap certain points, the researcher can attempt to highlight and subsequently dispel any bias observed in an objective and transparent way. And so if you have newspaper articles that state one thing, and you have letters of correspondence that state something slightly different, and a third document that overlaps certain aspects of both documents, you would need to use all three to triangulate what is fact. However, you must not make this distinction on your own, and you must be transparent in reporting and the way that you present all data and any opposing data in order to maintain your objective and transparent stance. Edelman noted that newspapers, which were generally accepted as reliable primary sources because of how quickly the information was printed in reference to an event and because of the nature of publication, that it could be critically reviewed by others and fact-checked, sometimes were clouded by a dependence on sport promoters a reliance on sport for increased circulation, and the fact that journalists were often members of dominant class, and so they may have dominant class and ethnic prejudices. The epistemological position of the researcher could also be a potential bias that may impact resource selection and examination along with touring experience. We must be critical of ourselves and ensure that we are not looking at documents from one specific point of view or epistemological approach, as this can impact the way that we filter which documents to view or cite and ultimately lead to tunneled conclusions. Further, the availability of information in an archive or the information presented in a facility tour could inherently produce biased conclusions based on the interests or peculiarities of their donors and or organizations who selectively organize each for self-promotion. Tours are marketed and sold. People generally pay money to go on a facility tour. Organizers put information within these tours that are positive and pre-selected. They would not necessarily tell you information that would potentially damage their reputation. They will tell you the positive information that will help you to continue to promote their business. A complement to other research methods. Quantitative research observes relationships between variables at a single moment and are oftentimes unable to account for background information or contextual influence. Qualitative research relies on thick description, but also on unique experiences, and so lacks an ability to offer generalizations that can be applied to other scenarios. This is where historical research can bridge the gap. It fuses quantitative and qualitative research by allowing the researcher to not only generate questions, but to find the answers and solutions, as well as predict change for the future. Historical research also shows the connection between management-related issues and everyday life. So we can produce generalized outcomes for sport managers, college athletic departments, and others to be applied to the real world in the present and the future. I hope that you would take the time to do your own archival research in the future. Again, my name is Tiffany Demiris. I am a doctoral student at Louisiana State University, and my email address is here on the screen if you'd like to ask me any questions.